or training, on a lathe or some piece of industrial equipment, you got to build knowledge iteratively. So I think the solution is not who bears the burden of this. It's not the employee. It is organizations need to modify and improve the way that they teach their people, so that the learning actually stays. And I think we have a perfect opportunity for that with the technologies of today.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about that. Let's pull that apart. I mean, how can is it small digestible chunks, and how can this be fed to people using the technology we have today?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it before. I mean, everything is cloud-based now, and everything is highly interactive and collaborative, more than it ever was. So, I think about every meeting you've been to in person, every training session you've been to in person. Uh, it's always, as I said, condensed into a small block of time because that was the only way to do it up until now. But now we have the capacity to do a lot.
Greg Sheldon here, your host of Metal, Steel, Manufacturing, and Business Pro podcast, where you learn everything about the metals and manufacturing industry that make your modern day life possible. Hi, Steve. How are you this morning? I actually forgot to mention before we started talking, I have two podcasts and I'm not sure which one this is going to go on because you have so much information that we can cover. And, I think both audiences would find a lot of value in it. So thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's a delight, and whatever I can share with your audiences, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. So you tell us about yourself, and your area of study is so interesting to me because our world is changing and you're definitely abreast of that. And I'd love to learn, and the audience about what it is that you do, like what kind of information you're putting out there and why.
Yeah, absolutely. I can answer that really by just telling you how I started the company, which was back in 1990. I was a student, had to find a job to pay my way through school and so on. And I was just doing number crunching at a Bank of Montreal data center. And everywhere that I worked, people were having trouble with computers. They were afraid of what the computers were doing. What happens if I close this and I don't save? Will I lose my work and will I lose my job? I don't get this stuff. What are these F keys on the keyboard? I don't understand. And so I realized that there was this fundamental disconnect between the engineers who create the technologies and the end users. Engineers have a mindset, and everything's eminently practical, but end users are not necessarily of the same concept mentally. They approach things differently. So I spent more time explaining to people how the software worked, and gradually just moved into that and created a company that just helped people understand the technologies they're working with. And basically, that's what I'm doing to this day. The company does its own thing. I do mostly speaking now, but it's translated from, what is Windows and what is the internet to what is blockchain and what is cybersecurity. And the same underlying fear still exists that if I get it wrong, I'm going to lose my job. And that's what I'm trying to help people learn, that they won't have to lose their job. It's about learning, it's about progress, and it's about technology and people together.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly is. Absolutely. And I love that you brought blockchain up, and we'll get there because I would love to learn more about that. But I want to talk about the fear, and you talk a lot about that in your articles and podcasts. And where does that fear come from? And I see it in other people that I'm close to, where they're afraid of closing this window or whatever, and they're afraid they're going to lose. And I understand cloud computing has changed a lot of that, and that's excellent. But where does that fear come from? And what is that?
Well, ultimately, I mean, the ultimate source, if you drill down, you just do sort of like a five-way analysis type thing, you drill down to a root cause, you can see that it's not a fear of the computer, it's a fear of what it's going to do to me as an employee, right? If I look bad, I'm going to get punished. And we learned that back in primary school. If you get something wrong, you're bad, which is something that I'm passionately against. I'm really railing for a better approach to education than simply right and wrong and bell curves of, bright people, adequate people, and the ones who trail at the end. That's not fair for anybody. But that's where it starts, is if you're wrong, you're bad. And this can become something that, when you look at your job, and once you get a job, obviously, it's a sort of a hamster wheel. Once you get a job with a certain amount of pay, whatever that happens to be, you then adopt a living style that matches that pay. So you're always essentially, now you've got to feed the beast. So if you lose that job, you're going to lose all of your livelihood. So this is another thing I'm passionate about is career self-affirmation, how you can build that safety net to not be afraid of losing your job. Just move to the next job. It is possible in any industry, not just computer-based. So the fear ultimately, in my opinion, comes from just the fear of personal danger, losing your livelihood, losing your essential economic life by making a mistake. And so, there are other things, for example, other areas of fear. If you're a manager and your employees are now wanting to work from home, there's a fear of how can I trust people that I can't see? But that too comes down to your own self definition of being a manager. So that's my short answer, Greg, would be it's really a fear of your own personal safety, life safety, and that's where everything ultimately motivates our resistance or our concerns about technology.
Yeah, okay. Great. So how do we start to change this from a very young age? Is it the way, is it a Socratic method in the teaching of children, or what's your thoughts on that?
It's a more personalized method of teaching, whether it's children or adults. We have been through centuries, or at least let's say the last 200 years of basically a sausage factory type education system. You all go into school, you get indoctrinated in certain amounts of what math is, what science is, what grammar is, and you either get it or you don't. And as I heard from many biographies of great sort of corporate success stories, learning was about copying what was on the blackboard. Now we're in an era where this can change. People of any age, so primary school through to adults of any age, learning in a way that fits your learning style, I think, is the first step towards creating workers, entrepreneurs, specialists, and technicians who can truly tune into their own particular way of doing things. So the answer is not to get people to just do the same thing over and over again. And believe me, I have delivered hundreds of 6-hour training sessions to people. And I know full well that after the end of the first hour, the curve of retention just drops away like a hockey stick. It's just such wasted money. But it is the traditional mindset of employers. Well, send your people to a training session for a day. And it's the most economic way of doing things. Whether this is learning a soft skill, such as negotiation skills, a computer skill, or training, on a lathe or some piece of industrial equipment, you got to build knowledge iteratively. So I think the solution is not the who bears the burden of this. It's not the employee. It is organizations need to modify and improve the way that they teach their people, so that the learning actually stays. And I think we have a perfect opportunity for that with the technologies of today.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about that. Let's pull that apart. I mean, how can is it small digestible chunks, and how can this be fed to people using the technology we have today?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it before. I mean, everything is cloud-based now, and everything is highly interactive and collaborative more than it ever was. So, I think about every meeting you've been to in person, every training session you've been to in person. Uh, it's always, as I said, condensed into a small block of time because that was the only way to do it up until now. But now we have the capacity to do a lot more asynchronous learning, and of course, it's easier if that learning is text based or visuals based. But even for things that are more mechanical and physical, we have virtual reality and augmented reality technologies that allow for at least part of this. I'd still want my team to show up at the shop and learn to do something on the real machine eventually. But a lot of the learning curve, what we would call apprenticeship, ironically, that's my name, that's my surname.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Apprenticeship was the gradual learning of a skill until the master feels confident enough to let you go and take it over yourself. It wasn't condensing the learning into just a matter of hours. So really, yeah, it's a matter of going asynchronous, going interactive in terms of individual people's learning styles, and taking full advantage of the enormous capacity of our collaboration technology to do this one-on-one at people's own times and convenience. That is an opportunity that people should really grab enthusiastically now.
Absolutely. So how do you motivate people, and things like gamifying it and all that come to mind? Is how do we motivate employees to continue on the education process? Because we know not everybody's the same, right? And do you have any ideas around that?
Absolutely. I mean, motivation is going to come from, first of all, confidence in their ability to learn, which they may not have had a lot of through their schooling years. and relevance. Why am I learning this? What's important about this? For example, let's say we take one of my favorite issues, which is password management software. No matter what organization you're in, no matter what industry you are in, you've got to keep your organization safe from hackers and all the bad people out there. Most companies have successfully built a fortress around their building, so it's very hard to hack into a company's IT system, but it's very easy to fool a person to click on a link or befriend them by pretending to be a supplier. I can be one of your suppliers bringing in raw materials to your factory. I can pretend I personally could identify those individuals and start to send communications that look like invoices from them with real names that I have been able to search out. This is called social engineering. And this is I can impersonate, just like a confidence person would. I can impersonate somebody and convince you or the CEO to hand over $600,000 in advance for a delivery that's going to come. So the idea here is we've got to give learning opportunities for people in any skill that gives them the confidence to say they can learn in the ways that best suit them without recriminations. And that means numerous times learning it till you get it right. And secondly, there's relevance. What do I care if the company gets hacked? Well, if the company goes down because of ransomware, you're out of a job, at least for 6 months while we clean everything up. Wow. That's not a threat. That's just simply a direct connection, cause and effect connection. Yeah. That some people don't get a chance to see because they think it's all victimless crimes. And no, it comes around to us when all of a sudden we can't sell products because the factory's closed down.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's reality. Hacking is very prevalent today. So, yeah, thank you for that. So, augmented reality and virtual reality. Now, the old standard way of training people is put them on a piece of equipment and learn from the guy, that knows a lot more than you, has the wisdom and the experience. Is there a way to catch all that information and then share that? And then I guess that becomes scalable too, right? That's an efficient way to share that with the rest of the group. Are we seeing any programs like that for apprenticeship?
Oh, absolutely. They're happening everywhere and in every industry. And I love looking at the technical universities and technical colleges. We've got things in Canada here like George Brown University, which are really, I love those kinds of places because they teach practical skills. Now, imagine, for example, it's something that I would love to do. I would love to learn how to drive a tractor trailer. I just love big machinery. And so to learn to drive a truck or even a tractor itself, an actual John Deere farm tractor. There's lots of levers and buttons and things. And I always tell my wife, how hard could it be? What could possibly go wrong? Well, the thing is, you could take me to a truck or a tractor and show me the ropes for a day. How much of that am I going to remember at the end of the day? If, however, and these things exist, virtual reality, video games, basically, where you can do this stuff. Even though you don't have the real pedals in your living room, you can do the stuff to learn the layouts so that when the time comes for the practicum, for getting in the cab and starting to drive it, you've got a far greater familiarity of where everything is. So, of course, a virtual reality can't do 100% of the full training. But I look at the ones they have for engineers, for locomotives, or for ship's crews. The reality that you can get into, even at home, in experiencing different weather conditions and different kinds of accident scenarios or avoiding them is remarkable. So I think that just the same way that we in the last 100 years learned to hold this strange device to our ear called a telephone, we can hold a strange device to our eyes and wear the Quest or an Oculus headset. It's weird right now. Every new thing is weird until it becomes the norm. Yeah. But I think that any organization that needs a lot of solid hands-on practical training of how to use their equipment can do so well by giving somebody a VR-based environment, play it as many times as you want, gamify it so they can score points. They can maybe even get some physical rewards from the company for doing really well. Yeah. So when it comes time to sit in that cab or stand in front of that machine, they're far closer to the practical abilities than ever before. I think it's a wonderful time for that right now.
Yeah, I agree. Things that are coming to mind is Miller, which is a big manufacturer of welding products and welding machines and all kinds of things in that area. They have actually virtual welding training now where you can actually put on a headset and do the welding training, so it's out there. And, it's not see those that progressive companies doing that, right? But you still have people that struggle with this digital transformation, and I'm wondering, what you say to people that, I will deal with that when I get there, or when I'm forced to do it, I'll do it. Are there advantages before that happens that they should, maybe think about these things, is
Absolutely. And the wild card basically that has changed from where we are right now to, let's say, 50 years ago, is the speed of change. Things are changing much more quickly. I mean, in the 20th century, we could talk about decades, and you could create a 5-year or 10-year plan to work against. But now we're talking about months or even weeks before the world changes. I mean, Elon Musk only has to say one thing on one tweet and the world changes.
Mhm.
We've got to look at that. So it means that when I'm thinking about, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, it may be too late, because by the time we've done that, a new competitor that didn't even exist when you said that statement has grown up as a unicorn and has become the new big thing in this business. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's unless you are someone of the size of GM, where you can actually wag the dog of the economy, and even they are have learned this now.
Mhm.
Um, when cars like the Tesla came around and changed the whole public mindset towards electrically powered cars, now I'm seeing commercials on TV for not only electrically powered cars and trucks from Ford and GM, but also if you buy one or order one, because they're so hard to get, they'll help you install a charging bay in your house. I mean, they've learned, right?
Yeah.
So the
Yes.
point is new scale management, new age management. And that doesn't mean people only in the 20s. You could be a new age manager in your 60s if you embrace change this fast.
Mhm.
Have to say, what's out there right now? And I must remove the training that how I was trained as a manager back in the 1970s is no longer applicable. I got to strip away that hierarchical mindset, that slow turnaround mindset. And I hate to use the buzzwords, but the word agile just comes up. You have to be agile to move with the times, and recognize that the speed we're going, you can't sort of say, well, I'll give it a couple of years and think about it. No, you got to talk about it now with experts. Bring them in, talk to experts, do micro learning by going onto LinkedIn and Twitter and reading good stuff from good people. There is good stuff on Twitter if you look for it,
Yeah.
on what your industry is about, and learn daily about what's going on. There is no time to waste.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great answer. And my hope is that people or business owners or people in the industry or any industry can hear that and say, okay, change is coming. It's this is the time right now. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Um, so when we talk about, all of this stuff and digital transformation, I mean, it's coming. Now, virtual meetings, you have a lot of content on virtual meetings, and um I've accepted it, and I COVID certainly helped with that. But I'm wondering about the actual logistics of it. Like, what's the effectiveness of virtual meetings, and are people becoming easily distracted, or how is all that panning out in the corporations and businesses in North America?
My answer to that is to say, do you remember what the first videos looked like on MTV in 1990? They were terrible. Or you want to go back another few years, what the first web pages looked like when the the internet first came? They were terrible.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at, because the COVID, what I call peak COVID, 2020, 2021, when everyone had to go home and work from home regardless, that showed the world it's possible to do most of the work or much of our work from home.
Yeah.
But the technologies that, again, were just available, like Zoom and like other video chat technologies, they're still what I would call video chat 1.0. We're really taking the concept of just people on a camera, um, and just using that as the first level of that. Just like, as I said, early videos were just simply no one knew what to do. If you go back 50, 100 years, early television, early movies was just simply vaudeville in front of a camera. So we always do what we're used to in with this new medium. But the new technologies coming out are far more interactive and engaging. So virtual meetings, I believe there's nothing that cannot be done in the virtual world that has been done in the office, whether it's formalized meetings or the informal conversations that people have in just chatting to each other, being together. All of this can be done virtually, but people are still in that transition phase of accepting this. They can't quite get it. And when they look at things like the metaverse from Meta/Facebook, it looks weird and cartoony, and they're not used to that yet. But
Yeah.
I always say, hey, again, that phone thing you put by your ear, there's somebody's voice in that phone. Does anybody say, hey, is there a person in here? No, we know what a phone is. We know how it works. And I think as more people get into the next version 2.0 of video, virtual chat, and meetings, it's going to become the convenience factor will be there. It's cool. You can do so much, and you waste so much less time, if I can put it that way. It's just less time that everything you do in a meeting can be done virtually. But we need to learn because there's an acronym I love to use called THWADI, THWADI, which stands for That's How We've Always Done It. And when you view things from that perspective, it's like, well, this isn't going to work. But I would guarantee you that, a couple of years from now, everyone's going to say, boy, why did I ever drive an hour both directions to go and sit in a room and talk to a bunch of people when I can do it in 15 minutes in my kitchen? So
Yes.
everything that you do, not only in meetings, which is the highly formalized component of interacting with your colleagues or customers, but
Mhm.
also the informal stuff can all be done virtually. And I think the market is going to drive that as a new generation of professionals say, heck no, I don't want to drive to work. I want to work from home. And if you're not going to hire me on those conditions, I'll go work somewhere else because that's the power that has now emerged.
Yeah, absolutely it has. Well, the great resignation
Yeah.
is happening, and we've got the baby boomers are all retiring. Certainly, there's an issue of employees have some power at this point in time, right?
Yes. Yes.
Where do you see all that going for business, business owners? I mean, what is going to attract people this day and age to come work for a corporation? I mean, I've talked to on other episodes about it's about having a sense of purpose. It's those people want to bring value to it, but I'm wondering what your perspective is with all your research and experience.
Yeah, it really is a sort of a buyer's market for employees, workers, to choose where they want to work far more than before. I mean, we have been again conditioned, be grateful for a job if someone offers you a job. But that again is 1940s thinking. Now it's a matter of saying, I want to sell my skills to you as a transaction. And if you're not happy, I'll go and work somewhere else. And you're seeing more and more people being able to do that, feeling confident about that. So
Yes.
all the company has to do is to switch around its mindset from again hierarchy and command and control to much more of a human organized approach. They're saying, when, where, and how you wish to work or how you want to schedule your time now becomes part of our obligation as managers to manage. That's what managers are supposed to do, is to manage. So we're managing how are we going to continue to produce our output in a far more flexible or employee oriented approach. That is the challenge of management. It is eminently possible to do, but you are always going to find certain people who still want to stick with the more authoritarian rule and do things the way the old school. And I say good luck to you. The people that you retain in your organization will likely not be the best because the best and brightest are going to move to where their conditions of work are far more appealing. So a smart company right now is going to look around and not just simply say what technology is out there, but more literally, what's in the wind? What are people feeling about work? Because the great resignation and the follow-up concept called quiet quitting, which is about just slowly going back to the very basics of your job and losing emotional connection with the company. These things are truly pandemic right now. They are part of the working environment because people are voting with their feet. So it's not a bad news statement. This is great news for companies who will say, how can we supercharge operations? Yeah, of course you can. But when you look at your technology, also look at your people and say, how do they want to work? And that's going to be the magic key for their success in the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's great. So I guess what you're saying is fundamentally, management or ownership of companies need to change their mindset about um how they're interacting and what how they're managing. So they can't just read a book that's 5 years old. You need to be on the forefront of what's working today. And does that correlate with the technology where it's changing monthly, weekly, daily?
Absolutely, it does. I mean, the thing is, as companies grow from, let's say, a one-person startup into something that is, people to 500 people, the middle layer always grows disproportionately large. And this is not, again, a knock against management, but what happens is we need there's this fatter layer of managers to manage an organization, and it correspondingly reduces the output of the actual working people themselves. So yes, they need to look at this again, not from a business book that's 10 years old or from the courses they took 20 years ago, but from what's happening now in the world. What is going on when you see things like new technologies, low Earth orbit satellites distributing internet signal around the world. When you're looking at virtual surgeries, when you're looking at anything that's going on, you could look, for example, at the case studies of coronavirus vaccine and distribution. A perfect case study of what's happened in the last 2 years in an emergency situation for the entire planet. That's the case study to look at right now when deciding how to use or modify your supply chain, both in and out. So this means going back to the good old-fashioned 80-20 rule. Okay, it's old-fashioned, it's hundreds of years old, but the point is you spend 80% of your time on your business, but you have to spend 20%, sorry, I got it the wrong way around, 80% in your business, doing the things that your business does, 20% on your business, looking at how we can improve this. What do I need to know today? What has changed today? And do I have a circle of people in my management decision-making team to embrace this, adopt this, and understand it, rather than sort of saying, no, that newfangled stuff isn't going to work here. This is how we've always done it. So the 80-20 rule is by far the best prescription for survival in this new era.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you again, just to be clear about the 80-20 and what working on your business and in your difference means.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe I just said it wrong, but no, I
No,
got it right.
you said it
Yeah,
great. I just
yeah,
want to be clear because this is a concept that I love working on and in,
yeah.
and I see more working in than working on. Maybe it's the percentages are different, but yeah, if
It's
you
it's the hamster wheel mentality, right? Even if you take it down to a one-person operation, just a single person self-employed, if they spend 100% of their waking hours just doing the work, writing, creating, whatever it is that they're actually selling as a product, that's great. You get a day's worth of work done, and you get some money from that. But you don't plant any seeds for growth and bringing in new business, right? I mean, you've got to always have a hopper full of leads and prospects. And the old-fashioned ways of doing things with newsletters and email blasts and Google ads and stuff, that doesn't work. You got to have a network of people who can refer you new business. So if you spend 100% of your time just doing the work of your company, that looks good from a day-to-day perspective, but it is not building any future. So you have to discipline yourself to say, even though I could do 1 more hour of work today, paid work, very tempting. No, I got to spend that hour working on my business in terms of creating something that is going to attract new business to keep that hopper full. So that's it. Working in your business is doing the stuff inside of your company, and the temptation is to do that 100% of your time. It takes a great discipline and courage to say, I'm going to step away from 1 hour of paid work and focus on the business development, brand management, putting out a YouTube video, whatever that expands my awareness field to others. And the same thing would apply for large organizations too. It's a matter, again, of always keeping an eye on that future, because you can't rely on these current skills based on past learning to guarantee your future.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the clarity. Appreciate it. So I want to go back to children and in schooling. And are there any schools at this point in time that are doing virtual learning after COVID? I mean, that's strictly their focus. Is that happening right now that you know of?
There are many. There are models even that school boards in areas like Chicago have been using for a few years, even prior to COVID, called flipped schooling. And I love this concept. It's just one of many, but flipped schooling is where you, exactly as we spoke about when I was talking about learning how to drive a truck, you give the students, let's say, a video or some sort of interactive media-based thing, sanctioned and prepared by the school board. This isn't a matter of just going onto YouTube, but a specific video to watch on a topic. So they watch this on their homework time. Mm-hmm. And then we use the in-class time, whether it's in real class or in the virtual now, but the in-class time when you have access to the instructor to ask the questions. I watched the video. I wasn't clear on this thing. Can you help me? That's flipping flipping it around from a teacher just delivering facts and then forcing people to go home and struggle with homework where they don't have the guidance to figure it. That's a big part of why so many students don't do as well as they could. So yes, there are many schools out there that are using the technology to flip things around in these ways to maximize the student teacher time for full development and learning, and use just simply the opportunities for the media that we have to do the rest. And that's a big difference.
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, most traditional school boards are based on an old model, and it's very hard politically and also with teachers' unions to make changes that a union is going to say this endangers our teams. So there's always that issue as well.
Yeah. Is there anybody fighting against that, or not fighting, but I guess, trying to create awareness around that, in our school boards and unions? Is that happening?
There are a number of, I mean, there's a number of groups that are studying how to do this. But once again, at this point, they are still kind of out there, outside of the circle of established teaching. And so it's a slow change because, like in many organizations, there's a lot that has to be shifted. And to be fair to the management of the educational systems, many are going to be the concern for students' welfare and their learning is a top priority.
Well, of course.
Yeah, but again, there's also the concern of, I mean, here in Canada, I'm always concerned, and also elsewhere in North America, shoving all these kids back into a classroom because of the economic convenience of putting them somewhere where the parents can go back out to work, I find to be a little less than putting the students' priorities first. It's a matter of we got to put the kids somewhere because the parents have to go out and work. So there's when you can see this as moving into the physical danger of obviously ongoing COVID, which we're always having to be aware of. So it's a big ship to turn in the middle of the ocean. But once again, I think that the universities, let's say, where you pay to go to school, are being the first ones to shift this around, but to attract paying students to come. And it will filter down to the pedagogical system of regular schooling. But as always, you've got the economics. The wealthy schools will do it first, and the people who are not as wealthy have to wait their turn. So it's certainly a slower change than you'd find in private enterprise because there's so much administration and strings connected back to politicians and therefore back to voters.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Politics. Yeah. And then as a kind of a rebuttal, like socialization, where, there is a need for people to socialize as us humans, as hunter-gatherers, is that, and extending further than that with social media as well, is that going, I mean, I know we don't have any evidence, but are we going to see some problems? I do think we do have some evidence actually about the social media creating a distance between people and it not being used in the proper ways because these devices are made to train us to go on them, right?
Yes.
So, and they have the top scientists in addiction to do this, to create a product, right? Because it has to be a profitable business to be on the stock exchange, right? So I guess I'm curious about time off of these devices and our kids spending time away from them and being in a social setting. Is that part of the program that we were just talking about, the flip program, where they still get that time in school?
I don't think we can ever wean anybody off the technologies we have because it speaks to a fundamental desire to communicate. People check their phones either to communicate with existing contacts or even just to jump on Insta right now or anywhere, TikTok, and see what's going on. There's a constant desire, and of course, the owners of these applications have very good algorithms to fine tune the output in response to what you look for to guarantee you're going to come back and look more. I can't imagine that people will ever put their phones down. And honestly, if you asked me to do that even during an exam, a formal 3-hour exam somewhere, I couldn't do it. And most people can't. It's just part of your life. However, I also can't imagine that people will stop socializing. People do love to get together in person. So, the new era is going to be a hybrid era where everyone has their phones, everyone takes their selfies and has fun with them. But I don't, anybody who goes to the idea, and I hear this even again in corporate training sessions, everyone please put their phones away. Please put your phones away and close your laptops down and pay attention to the teacher. No, it isn't going to happen because people just aren't going to be willing to accept that any longer.
Mhm.
So the obligation is I have to deliver, or anybody has to deliver, a course and content that is going to dovetail with their attention spans and also accommodate. If you want to tune out for 5 minutes to respond to a call or something, I believe that it's up to me to create the content that you can catch up with rather than me punishing somebody for looking away at their phone. This is the world we're in right now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely it is. Um, yeah, I had a great point there, but I forgot what I was going to say. That happens to me almost. Oh, I remember.
Yeah.
Uh, the social dilemma come out. Actually, this comes up almost every episode. That the social dilemma, which is a documentary on Netflix. Are you familiar?
Yes.
Yeah, and it came out, and I think you're right. The proof is that came out, nothing changed, and the genie's out of the bottle. You
Hmm.
know, we've we've got our phones, and that's just part of it. You don't leave home without it. So that's just the way things are going. So I like that mindset that you have about accommodating to utilizing it.
Yeah, it's a tool that has you can sort of say, well, who invented the smartphone, who invented the computer, but the fact is these things would have been invented anyway. It's just part of the natural evolution of how humans communicate and interact. So obviously Apple and Microsoft were the first ones, or at least the ones out of the gate that ran the fastest and the furthest. But this is a natural thing. And so it's the same thing. 100 years ago, we'd have movements of people wanting to ban the car. And I use this as an example when I'm teaching to say the pushback about cars was that bank robbers could now get away faster than our mounted police could chase them. This is, again, in the US as well, is our, horse-based police can't chase cars. Don't take trains because trains will suck the air out of your lungs. If you travel faster than a galloping horse, it'll asphyxiate you. There was, and one of the things I put in the book was what was called a bicycle face. There was a big movement against women using bicycles because it got them out of the house. It got them out of the house to socialize, and that wasn't greeted very well in a patriarchal society that didn't like women. As soon as they, get out of the house and socialize, control is lost. And of course, I'm just referring historically here to the
Yeah,
mindset at the time. So they came out with a condition called bicycle face that says if you cycle on a bicycle, the wind will dry out your face and make you look ragged and old, and try to appeal to vanity or insecurity to convince women not to use bicycles. And we see this, to this day in different variations.
for sure.
Human beings are destined to communicate and collaborate, and this technology is there to help that happen. And so if the teaching or working environments we currently use aren't fitting, it's up to them to change, not the humans, because we're just moving along on an evolutionary trajectory of
Yeah.
which electronic communication is central.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I'm going to add those examples to my repertoire of things that I say about conventional wisdom, which is almost always wrong.
Yes, it is.
Thank
It's
you.
It's
So,
like wisdom is a liquid asset. You can
yeah,
hold it temporarily, but it's going to drain through your fingers. It's got to be reinforced regularly. So yeah, these are great stories because they show we've been. This is not anybody's first rodeo. Every new technology that comes out
that's right.
is going to be greeted with a no first, and that again always comes down to fear. What are they fearing? Loss of control, change, loss of their business viability. I'd rather stick with the status quo than to evolve, and that unfortunately is not an option any longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to that for the listeners, if we look at the, S&P 500, the top corporations on that list, they're all innovative. They're all progressive. They're all about let's become a better version of ourselves. And maybe that's a model that everybody needs to follow, even personally, right? So,
Oh, absolutely. Especially if you look at the history of the S&P or even the Nasdaq as compared to the Dow Jones, which was just simply an arbitrary collection of the most successful companies, a handful at the time it was created. The Dow Jones is so out of touch right now, except culturally. Everyone thinks if the Dow Jones is up, the economy is good. But no, it's a matter of saying, well, wow, coal-fired steam trains are doing well. It's just the wrong place right now. It's much better to look at the newer companies that are grouped in newer indexes as a reference guide to what to do.
hmm hmm absolutely. Wonderful. So you talk about, I believe in a lot of your information and podcasts about the speed of things and people, trying to rush through things. And I wanted to pick your brain on that, is we often think that sometimes to get things done, we got to go fast.
Hmm.
And um, I used to think that as well. I'm guilty of it. And I'm just wondering, from your experience and the people that you know and all the information you have, how is slowing down more efficient?
Oh, slowing down has a place, absolutely, because despite all of what we just said right here, the human self, our physical selves, even though we are continuing to evolve, is still based on a platform or let's say a version that is many tens of thousands of years old. So we can communicate much more quickly than ever before. I mean, it still floors me to this point that you and I can be having a video conversation. I mean, that's how old I am, I guess. But this was science fiction not so long ago. And the same thing that you can send an email around the planet right now without instead of putting it in a piece of paper and handing it to a postal person. But at the same time, human beings, our instincts, again, for fear and response are hundreds of thousands of years old. And so is our capacity to process things. So there is value in slowing down in all kinds of different areas. For one, I would always advocate handwriting thoughts out, whether you write them out on paper or on a whiteboard on a a meeting, a virtual chat room. The physical act of handwriting actually is closer to the speed by which your brain processes thoughts. If we were a team, I'd want to brainstorm with visuals that we put on a virtual or real whiteboard. It's because when you put written material onto a surface, you can actually free up your mind that no longer has to hold on to those initial thoughts to create the next thought. It's basically therapy. You get a piece of a fact out, you create space for the next piece. So there's always great value in slowing down to maximize your human capacity. And once again, go back to the 80-20 rule. If you spend all of your time always on instantaneous communications, you're not going to give yourself a chance to think creatively, critically, analytically. And that again becomes part of a professional skill that not everything must be done super fast. And just one other very brief example, if you receive an email in your inbox that says urgent new COVID protocols for the department from head office, please read. And you click on that without thinking any further, and it doesn't happen to be from head office, but from some crime organization out there. You've just loaded ransomware into your company. You now shut the company down. So slowing down to think through what am I doing when I click on this thing is a skill that has to be taught and reinforced daily because the repercussions can be months long and very, very expensive. So there's always value for slowing down in the midst of this high speed world.
Yeah, wonderful. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. Um, I appreciate your time, Steve, a lot. You are a wealth of knowledge. I'm curious about, we've talked a lot about business and stuff, well, in schooling and a lot of great things, but I'm curious about people that wanting to start a business on their own or from home, and um, it's more, the barrier to entry is very low at this point in time. How does somebody stand out when they're trying to do that in the market? Like, is there technologies that they can use to be a better communicator, I guess, in their space? So if anybody's starting to do that or looking to do that, how can they um, do that well, I guess?
Well, I mean, the good news is it's very possible to do. I mean, you choose a profession that is a passion for you. That's step number one. Something you love to do makes it far less like work. You just love to do it. It's great to get up in the morning and just do the stuff you love to do. How do you get out there? This is one of the oldest games in the book, but still works just as well. It's your network. It's word of mouth. It's a matter of, once again, that 80-20 rule comes back around. You spend some time building and perfecting your offerings, whether it's photography services, accounting services, freelance underwater scuba welding, which is a very well paid job, by the way.
Yeah.
But who gets to know who you are? Well, that's where you can leverage things like LinkedIn properly. Most people don't think of LinkedIn as anything more than you stick your profile up because everyone else has. But the fact is, the people that you meet on LinkedIn become your network. And as you communicate with them, not just simply sending out stuff about you, but also asking and talking about them to them, you build a network of people who know you, trust you, and will happily refer your services to others. And there's no better marketing tool than word of mouth. You can spend thousands of dollars on any kind of multimedia or social media algorithmic thing, but it's still a drop in the ocean. Everyone else is doing it too. But
Yeah.
if you have a good network of people on LinkedIn, then you do some things such as create a YouTube video that shows something that you've been doing or something you can talk about as an expertise. That too is a drop in the ocean of a billion YouTube videos a day. But that's not the point. The point is to tell your circle of contacts on LinkedIn that that YouTube video exists. You don't need to reach 7 billion people. You only need to reach seven. They're the ones who can refer business to you. So curate your network of contacts. Just saying yes to everyone who asks you to connect doesn't guarantee anything. But when somebody does ask you to connect, say, thanks for inviting me to your network. Tell me more about what you do. How can I help you? Even if you're day one of a one-person show, how can I help you? And that starts to establish a relationship. And then when you see the notifications on LinkedIn saying, "Oh, this person, Greg's celebrating 5 years doing this," you drop them a line and say, "Hey, congratulations! I read your article. It's great. I heard your podcast. It's a really good episode." That is the glue that holds friendships together professionally. And as I said, you don't need to reach 7 billion people. You only need to reach seven, and they will get you the work you're looking for.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you. Do you think that 7 degrees of separation is any less than it used to be?
Maybe it's gone down a few degrees, absolutely, but it still works, absolutely.
Yeah.
Really great thing you can do if you have some spare time you want to just waste is to do 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, and you'll see that this is something that's been a joke for a while on social media. But the point is, behind the joke is a serious point. The reason why it's called 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon is not just because it rhymes. But Kevin Bacon, the actor, was a very savvy networker. He knew not just to simply hang around with big name film directors, but to talk to people on the crew, the catering people, the lighting people, the grips, because they're the ones who go off and work on other shows and can drop a good word to you. So
Yeah.
he has stayed continually employed as a one-person show, a professional actor, because he knew how to talk to everybody. And that's where work comes from. When I was doing keynotes, which I haven't done now for a couple of years for obvious reasons. I'm working in a big room, like 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 people. I will always hang out at the back with the lighting crew and the sound guys or the sound people, because first of all, I like them. So I'm a musician outside of my speaking world.
Yeah.
But secondly, they go and work at other conventions. And when someone says, "Hey, who do you know who could be a good entertaining speaker?" The sound person speaks up and says, "Hey, I saw Steve speak over there in this city. I think he'd be great." That's where the work comes from. And I tell people to this day, I started my business in 1990. I've never advertised. Everything has come
Wow.
from referral and exposure. Even media exposure. You read my blog, or I get something published in a newspaper, even online. And
Yeah.
someone says, "Hey, I read that story about you. Would you come and speak for us?" Okay, sure. That's beautiful. That is music, and I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Stephen. I appreciate your time.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. I love the questions. I love talking about it,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'm honored to be on your show.
Oh, well, thank you. It's an honor for me. The Kevin Bacon was in the news recently that I guess he lost a lot of money with Bernie Madoff.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, speaking of Kevin Bacon. All right. Well, thank you for your time, and I hope to do it again.
Oh, anytime. I'd be thrilled to come back. Just drop me a line. Let me know.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. If I don't talk to you, you have a great day, okay?
Thanks, Greg. You too. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye. What a great episode about how you can stay ahead of the curve in an industry, any industry that is changing so quickly today. This doesn't have to apply to any specific industry. It can apply to them all. Technology is here. It's here to stay. The genie's out of the bottle. And if you're thinking, well, I don't need to change, I don't need to adopt these new things, well, that's okay. I'm not saying you need to. What the market does and always does, it forces you to change. And what we're saying here in this episode is this is an opportunity for you to stand out above your competition, to create a better workforce that is up to date and has information that retains in their operations, in their daily tasks, because that's what it's all about, keeping your people trained, but them being better versions of themselves than they were yesterday. So What a great episode. I thank you, Steve, for all your research and hard work that you put into this topic. And I thank all the listeners for coming and listening. And it's very much appreciated. So until next time, thank you. Greg Sheldon here, your host of Metal, Steel, Manufacturing, and Business Pro podcast, where you learn everything about the metals and manufacturing industry that make your modern day life possible.